Coming to paperback and e-readers this April, Isis, Revenge of the Cyber Goddess. The goddess next door must take on the threat of a deadly digital diva driven to destroy the world in this action-packed all-new Isis series adventure. Get Isis, Revenge of the Cyber Goddess in paperback and e-readers this April. Last Friday, there was an attack at the Capitol building where an individual rammed a rental vehicle into a barricade and then wound up attacking and killing a police officer and stabbing another before other Capitol Police wound up taking his life. Now, most people would not have thought that Noah Green would have participated in this kind of attack based on his past background before he declined mentally. But when I take a critical examination of Noah Green, the man who wound up participating in this attack, he is somebody who I would say is a man in crisis, just like many of the men I talk about in my book, The Man Crisis. And it was clear to me after reading more about Noah Green's background that he was a man in crisis for several years, and most people did not know the seriousness of the crisis that this man was in. Now, when I really start to dig deeper into Noah Green's background, I can see where his mental health really started to decline, and I believe it probably started on the football field, because your Noah Green, even though he was a high achieving student, he might have wound up starting to have mental issues due to many of the concussions he probably might have received playing football in college. And that was probably exacerbated by your Noah Green's drug use, and I believe the combination of injuries that he sustained as related to his brain, as related to football, and drug use led to the mental decline of Noah Green and the foundation of that start of that mental decline, because I believe that that mental decline wound up getting accelerated due to the lockdowns that were proposed to deal with COVID-19, and I believe that that isolation combined with those concussions and that drug use is what led to your Noah Green winding up in a serious state of mental decline, because it was during that isolation that he wound up sitting there alone with nobody there to filter ideas or anybody to present a counterpoint to those ideas. Now, I believe that your Noah Green, before this pandemic, he probably was, again, struggling with mental health issues, but because he had a social circle to be able to talk to him and be able to provide him with some companionship and support, he was able to navigate a course in the world. But once we wound up in these lockdowns, I believe this is one of the things that led to the acceleration of his mental decline, and I believe that this is where he wound up in a place where he could not have anybody there to provide that counterpoint for him as related to many ideas he was imbibing on the internet. And I believe there was nobody there to show him proper context as related to what he was listening to. Now, there are some people in the media who want to try to blame the Nation of Islam for what happened with your Noah Green, but the Nation of Islam is not responsible for anything as related to Noah Green's motivation for participating in that act of violence at the Capitol. No, your Noah Green's mental health problems were starting to actually get accelerated again due to the lockdown, and again because he was already struggling with mental health issues. Much of the things he was listening to, he was not listening to with an objective mind. He was listening to it from a very, very distorted perspective. And sadly, because he was isolated from people, that isolation led to him listening to media out of context. And inside of that echo chamber, it wound up amplifying many of his distorted ideas, about whatever was going on in his mind. And in that isolation, we saw Noah Green really starting to again come up with ideas based on delusions he was having. And it was these delusions that I believe was one of the things that motivated him to do this. Because again, you're Noah Green. He did have a job out of school. He was about black empowerment, and he even took a trip to Africa and was trying to do something in Botswana when his mental health really started to decline. And it was after an episode in Botswana that he wound up coming back to America and then started talking about leaving his job and further declining mentally. So this young man had serious mental health issues, and these serious mental health issues were one of the things that I believe led to him going down to that capital and looking to go out here and do harm. And I believe that he was more of a danger to himself than he was to others, because in his delusional state, he was just not really in a place where he could think about anything, because his mind had been practically falling apart. Because if you look at the whole thing as related to his attack, he was driving this vehicle and trying to ram this barricade, and then he goes out here and tries to attack these police officers with a knife. That's not the actions of a person who is in their right mind, like a mass shooter. No, this is the actions of an individual who clearly has serious mental health issues. And again, when I look at this young man, he clearly was a man in crisis, but many people did not know how deep his crisis was, because here in America, most people, they don't really understand the gravity of the man crisis, and they don't understand how many men are suffering in silence the same way Noah Green suffered in silence. And he suffered in silence inside of his apartment by himself. He dealt with these struggles by himself, and he had, again, nobody there to give him that support or give him any sort of perspective. And because he had nobody there to give him any sort of support, he wound up falling into many of the things that many men in crisis wind up falling into. They wind up falling into addiction. And like I talk about in my book, The Man Crisis, in the chapter Addiction and the Man Crisis. And they also have to deal with things as related to unresolved issues that they're still dealing with, because there's nobody there to help them work these problems out. And because these men can't really get any sort of support, they wind up falling further into decline. And that's what happened here with Noah Green. This young man, he was struggling with so many issues, but nobody really understood the gravity of much of the issues this young man was dealing with. On the surface, he looked like he was doing extremely well. I mean, he had graduated top of his class. He had gotten himself a job, but many of the demons he was dealing with as related to his mental health, like I believe, numerous concussions he suffered, the drug use, and the isolation, all of these things accelerated many of Noah Green's mental health issues, and it led to this man in crisis winding up exploding in this rage, where he wound up participating in this spectrum of violent behaviors that led to him winding up losing his life. And because he wound up going out here and participating in this episode, many people, they want to try to create narratives as related to this Noah Green. They want to try to make it all about the Nation of Islam and Louis Farrakhan. But this man, he would have gone out here and participated in this episode even if it had been another subject that he had been listening to on the internet. Because when it comes down to these males who have these issues like this, these men in crisis, what happens is they wind up fixating on something, and that is what they use to be their motivation for participating in whatever episode of violence that they're going to participate in. So it didn't matter if he had been listening to Daffy Duck or Bugs Bunny. His mental health issues were going to be in a bad place, because again, when you have an individual who has head injuries and an isolation from the world, and nobody there to filter many of the ideas that they're having, and they're taking drugs, they're not going to be in a good place mentally. So people want to go out here and try to blame the Nation of Islam for this. They are absolutely wrong, as I see it, because again, when it comes down to individuals who have issues like this, and a series of issues like this that are accelerated by these lockdowns, isolating them from the world, you're going to have a lot of guys who are just not mentally there. So you can't really blame the Nation of Islam for any of this. This person's mental health issues would have been a problem had they even just gone outside and, seen a daffodil. That would have probably motivated them to do some sort of thing, because their head is not in the right place. Now, again, this is a tragic incident where we had a man in crisis, and because he could not get help, he wound up doing harm to others and to himself. But it shows how the man crisis is deep in this country. And what's sad is most people are looking to point fingers at different things instead of understanding that we have a man crisis in this country, and that we have millions of men suffering in silence. And many of those men, we could possibly save some lives if we could just acknowledge this man crisis and give these young men the help that they need. Because I believe that Noah Green, probably we could have saved his life had he gotten the help for his mental health, and we gone out here and acknowledged that this man was suffering, because he really was suffering for a lot of years after reading his background. And sadly, nobody really noticed the signs of him suffering, because here in America, we really don't acknowledge the man crisis, and we don't acknowledge the gravity of the man crisis here in America, and the way so many men like Noah Green were suffering. No, the media would like to try to place him like he's some sort of bad guy, but he's not a bad person. He really was about doing good in his community, but his mental health issues led to him having an episode, and that episode showed us all how much of a man in crisis he was. And when I look at this whole situation, it's another tragic incident in America's ongoing man crisis, a crisis that is, I believe, going to get worse, because after these lockdowns have ended and society starts opening up, I believe we're going to see a lot more tragic incidents like this, because when you wind up isolating large groups of already disenfranchised men in society, those disenfranchised men, they have been, like Noah Green, sitting inside of an echo chamber, and their mental health has been declining. And because their mental health has been declining, this is what's leading some of those men to wind up participating in violent episodes like Noah Green participated in. And I believe that America is going to have to confront this man crisis over the summer, because again, as America continues to open up and more of these men in crisis start returning to the world and looking to go out here and do harm to the world, there isn't going to be no denying this man crisis that has been going on in this country for the last 50 years and continues to get worse in this country, because the violence these men are participating in, there's not going to be any other answer but the man crisis that we're having in this country. And I believe that sadly, it's going to lead to a very, very, very dangerous summer. And again, that's why I tell everyone to keep their head on a swivel, because you've got a lot of, again, men who have been isolated for years, a lot of men who are deeply troubled, a lot of men who have been inside of these echo chambers and listening to all sorts of ideas and having nobody there to give them a filter so that they can think objectively and critically about it. And some of them can't think objectively like Noah Green could, because drugs and brain damage have clouded their minds. And that's what's going to make it very dangerous out here. So I want everybody to, again, keep your head on a swivel, keep your eyes open, because the violence you saw in Washington is just the tip of the iceberg, because we've got a lot of men in crisis in this country, and we really need to try to start getting these men help before they wind up doing harm to other people's loved ones. Now, if you want to learn more about the issues that lead to so many men winding up in the troubles that they're having, you can pick up my book, The Man Crisis, on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find The Man Crisis on Smashwords, the iBookstore, and Google Play. And this book has helped so many men figure out what's going wrong in their lives and help them start heading down a direction where they can start working towards getting things right. And it can help you towards helping getting things right, and start looking to help yourself before you wind up becoming deeply troubled and doing harm to others or yourself. And if you want to see me make more videos like this, you can donate to my Patreon, my PayPal, or my Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available, paperback and Kindle Unlimited, ISIS, the main event. It's carnage inside of a steel cage when the goddess next door steps in the squared circle with the beast from the boss in this action-packed, all-new ISIS series adventure. Get ISIS, the main event, paperback and Kindle Unlimited today.